This is an animated summary and analysis of the text, Dear Mrs Dunkley. Hi, I'm glad you're here. My name's Josh. Today we're going to analyse and understand the text, Dear Mrs Dunkley, looking at key ideas and themes throughout. So, before we get started, you have to understand that Helen Garner is a talented Australian writer growing up in Geelong. She's a multi-award winning writer who's also published fiction, non-fiction and worked in the journalism area. So the text starts with Helen Garner in grade 4 moving into Mrs Dunkley's class. Initially, she gets the impression of Mrs Dunkley being cold and merciless. Mrs Dunkley is first described as being thin, with short black hair and hands that trembled. Through this imagery, we get the impression of Mrs Dunkley being a short-tempered woman who is quite delicate despite not outwardly appearing so. Dunkley's clothes act as a recursive theme throughout the text. You'll see the clothes that made her scary to children end up being signs of her vulnerability once we see Helen mature. We have two main characters. Helen Garner. She is the author of the letter and she is writing into our second main character, Mrs Dunkley. Helen Garner is writing the letter as an adult, reflecting on a childhood perspective of her 5th grade teacher, Mrs Dunkley. As the letter progresses, we see Helen mature, making it a text type known as a Bildungsroman. Garner feels like Mrs Dunkley is disapproving of her. She feels like she is weak and insufficient to Mrs Dunkley's high standards. The irony of this will come up later, but pay attention. Mrs Dunkley is being painted to be this image of perfection. Essentially, Mrs Dunkley is hiding behind a false facade, but we get a momentary glimpse of Mrs Dunkley's human side. This is evident through the recount, I got it, you saw me get it. Mrs Dunkley has this facade of perfection. However, we later find out she was an alcoholic. We see Mrs Dunkley's identity change and Garner's tone soften. Reflecting from the modern day, Helen Garner writes, Dear Mrs Dunkley, you are long gone. I've got something here that I wouldn't be ashamed to show you, and I've got something I want to say. I would like to thank you. You taught me everything I know, the glory and the power of an English sentence, and the skills I would need to build one. We are seeing the tone shift to sympathetic and a grateful tone. We see the further softening of Helen's tone throughout the letter. Dear Mrs Dunkley, I know that your first name was Grace. I hope you found some, in the end, of your great moon calf, Helen. The pun of Helen playing with Mrs Dunkley's name, Grace, is an intriguing one. In one sense, it kind of goes back to her childlike self and how in Australia it's untraditional for you to know your teacher's first name. So it's almost as if this pun illustrates that Helen has actually grown up. The key themes we see explored include Garner's maturation and growth, characteristic of a Bildungsroman theme. Additionally, we see the idea of death and loss play out. Garner wishes she could thank Mrs Dunkley for the lessons she learned which further helped her succeed in life, therefore conjuring up ideas of forgiveness and gratitude. Furthermore, themes of loneliness are created, partly spurred on by Mrs Dunkley's demeanour mismatching her true identity, exploring another theme of appearance versus reality. There are two main character arcs, Mrs Dunkley going from a flawless character with high expectations of others into a woman who's struggling with alcoholism. Likewise, we see the maturation of Helen Garner, where she goes from a child-like perspective into her fully formed adult perspective. For me, there are 3 main takeaways of this text. When we write stories, we should create character arcs for our characters. The person the audience meets should be different to the person they become. This makes the experience more rewarding for the audience, since we the audience grow with the character. Additionally, finally, we can learn something from Helen's writing style. We have already established she is a skilled writer, with numerous accomplishments, so when she breaks the rules of writing, she does so for a reason. Don't be afraid to experiment in your own writing, because this will make you stand out. So up next, I strongly recommend you try the following questions. This will really make sure you understand the text. Importantly, you should check your answers, because the best way to learn and grow is through answering these questions, followed by checking your answers against a good quality set of answers. I'll include a link in the description below for you to get some. For further study notes, tips, tricks, and breakdowns of this text and other HSC texts, as well as numerous resources, check out the link below for my website, edzion.com.